Hello and welcome to another episode of DCU Daily. And today we are talking about the future of the DCU. And I know you might be thinking, well, the DCU has barely gone off the ground. What are you talking about the future of the DCU? Well, what we are talking about specifically is the future that we're not aware of, the projects that we haven't yet heard about, the unplanned, the surprising projects, the ones that are unannounced, that maybe even considered underrated potential additions to the DCU. Fans, throw questions at James Gunn all the time on social media, and sometimes he says that's happening. Sometimes it says it's possible. He's not always going to address every rumor, but he's usually quick to strike down anything that is wholly untrue. And there's been a lot of that, happening. So we're going to try to take account of those rumors, and then also we're going to try to speculate as to what else might be coming down the pike after Part One, Chapter One, which is what those 10 projects that they announced in 2022, I believe, at this point, because all of 2023 was just a bloodbath of the DCEU, but partly maybe even the DCU to blame. But anyway, before I go off on a tangent, let me introduce my co-host today. We have John. John, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. I really like I just felt like this is something that I want to talk about because it's like I love speculation and I love talking about stuff that isn't necessarily, the things that people are talking about and what could be for for the future of this. And yeah, so with as James Gunn said way back when this was announced, way back when um this was only part 1 of chapter 1, and how Peter Safran stated that they wanna try and have 2 films and 2 TV shows a year. So it seems like after this year, and I assume, um, Superman Legacy, I can imagine that we'll be getting, you know, 2, we're getting 2 in 2026 and then 2 in 2027 for each. So I liked that, and I like how not everything was revealed because, as James Gunn said, well, he felt that a lot of studios were beholden to release dates. So it's like, okay, the first thing they do is release date, and it's like, okay, we got to get everything done by then, even if it's 5 years ahead of time. Okay, got to do this, got to do this, got to do this. Where it's like, okay, let's actually care about what we're making first and then try to figure out release date. So it's like, all right, we're setting up filming in March 2024. I think July is a good, rough, release date, and we'll do it like that because actually putting care and effort into your project. What a thought. So I really like that, and I like how part 1, we got a good mix of projects. We were talking about this the other day, how I mean, we've talked about it a bunch, you know. We have a Superman and Batman project. We have a, Supergirl, cool, and then Swamp Thing, a little weirder, and then the Authority nobody knows about. Then we have okay, Green Lanterns and okay, that's a huge thing. And then we have okay, Paradise Lost and Booster Gold. Paradise Lost is something we don't really know in terms of Themyscira. We don't know a lot about. And then Booster Gold is kind of like this fan favorite niche character that not a ton of people know about, only in some TV projects. And then we get weirder stuff like Waller, nothing attributed to the Suicide Squad, or Peacemaker from what we know. And and then we have, Creature Commandos, which is weird as hell and, following that Doom Patrol vibe. So we have a good grab bag of safe stuff, but then to make the money back, but then experiment with other weird things like Swamp Thing and the Authority. And I really liked that. And we also mentioned how, we feel like how, with part 2, I don't think they even have a part 2. They probably have multiple part 2s with how, you know, they're gonna probably plan this. How okay, if Superman Legacy does very well, and that kind of we played it safe in a lot of areas. Well, okay, well here's the safer one. But if the Authority does really well, and that's sort of like a weirder, thing that not a lot of people know about. Okay, we have this more experimental, risky version, and then or we can do what we did with part one and just have a mishmash of like weirder projects and safer projects to get the money back for the safer projects. So the business side that Peter Safran is probably looking at, and then you have James Gunn's side where it's like, okay, let's do a movie on Gangbuster because sure, why not? So you have like that good mix of stuff. So I feel like that was definitely smart of them because I didn't even realize it was a part one. I thought it was all of chapter one, but no, it's just part of chapter one. I feel like that was a really good decision. How let's test the waters to see, especially in this day and age of like what is considered superhero fatigue. A lot of people are getting really tired of the same bland CGI bloated nine-figure movies that were like, okay, let's, try for something different. And I feel like this might be, actually something close to different. Maybe not totally different, but because, we're getting superhero movies, but it's something that's like, okay, let's try for this variety sort of thing going on. So I think that was the good route to go, I think.
Yeah, and like you said, they're gonna have backup plans, and if something fails, they can kind of pivot away from it, which I think is great. But what I wanted to kind of harken back to a little bit is one of the things that James Gunn said in the immediate aftermath of that big presentation a year or so ago, was that they didn't really announce everything. In fact, they purposefully held back a few things because they may be giving away a few spoilers by announcing such projects. So
Right.
you kind of hinted at it, like, that they already have plans and maybe going in several different directions. But my question would be, like, what possible projects could they be hiding from us simply because they would play spoiler to as to what is to come in the future of, let's say, chapter one or maybe even chapter two of the DCU? Like, any speculation on your part, any insight as to, like, where do you think they might be headed? Like, what could be one of those projects that they haven't announced simply because it might spoil the ending or the path that some of these movies and TV shows
Right.
might be going down?
I think like any sequel, because I mean, look, we haven't gotten like, oh, we're getting Superman Legacy, but also Superman 2 and Superman 3. So we're not getting any sequels. The only thing we're getting, I guess, kind of sort of is a Supergirl, which is adjacent to Superman. Um, but and then Batman, and then we'll, be setting some stuff up with, Guy Gardner and Mr. Terrific and Hawkgirl. And a lot of people have speculated that we might be getting a Justice League International project now, which could be definitely a really cool idea because James Gunn on Threads talked about was like was it probably means nothing, and it's us fans that just look into every single solitary thing trying to find meaning in every single little thing because we get so excited about this sort of thing. So he did it was like the I think like 35th, 36th, 37th anniversary of Justice League International, and James Gunn reposted that, and I'm like, okay, that's definitely something interesting. Yep, right there. How yeah, yes, the famous Batman clocking Guy Gardner, always a treat. Um, so yeah, so like I feel like with what we're getting, that's like kind of the vibe we're getting of like like the post crisis sort of world, and that's like what that was kind of the reigning champion of DC for years. That was like what many considered to be like the best era of DC Comics was, post crisis, pre New 52, and that just was great and that worked. So I feel like we're getting that vibe. But if we're announcing a Justice League International, well, that could bring up a few problems. Okay, oh, we're getting another Justice League film after the whole Snyder Cut craze for the past 5 years. It's like we have that. It could be maybe be like, oh, we're speeding too fast. We're doing this. We're doing that. So like that could be something, but they don't want to release it just yet, and that might be the climax of chapter one. And well, we don't want to, you know, tease the climax here. We want just have some taste here and there of like these variety of projects. So I think like, there's stuff like that, but there's also stuff that like I feel like there's characters and teams and concepts that could definitely be really cool to get that, like, have been talked about in the past, but I feel like they need to pull the trigger and really do. Like, for instance, in terms of movies, I'd love to see a Green Arrow movie, and I'd love to see a Plastic Man movie because I feel like Green Arrow, we got Arrow, which was like good sometimes and terrible sometimes, but for the most part, that was a show that was well liked outside of, I think seasons like 3, 4, and I think that kind of and like 6, 7, maybe. I don't know. I stopped watching after season 3. I'm like, I can't deal with this Felicity Smoke thing anymore. So, and speaking of, I would love to see, actually Black Canary be the love interest of Green Arrow. What a thought. And have it be like a Green Arrow, Black Canary movie. And I think, having something grounded, but not like trying so hard to be grounded, like something like the Batman, where it's like, okay, this is gonna be dark, grounded, gritty kind of thing. Green Arrow is a fun hero. He's awesome. He's oozes charisma. I feel like that's a character that just needs a proper, just a real like because many have joked that Arrow was essentially okay, Mark Guggenheim and Greg Berlanti. We can't make a Batman show. All right, let's make a Green Arrow show instead, and then just copy paste Batman onto that. I know that's a joke that's been made so much, but it's like that's what it kind of feels like. So I feel like I'd love to see more of like the, cheesy Green Arrow because I just feel like that character is like ripe for a lot of stuff, whether that be the pre-crisis version of like, hey, I'm wearing a Robin Hood costume and I decided to stop a robbery. Sure, why not? I don't know. I think that would be fun to see on screen. Or it could be the post-crisis version where it's like I was on an island for 5 years and I stopped a drug ring. I mean, both could work. I would love to see the pre-crisis version because I think that would be hilarious. Like just this dude wearing a Robin Hood costume. I'm gonna stop this bank robbery. Why? I don't know, because I'm bored. So I feel like that could be really fun. Like a Green Arrow, Black Canary, kind of have like just like the I would love to see like just a drama-free married couple just kicking ass, taking names, and just being awesome. Like, I don't wanna see this, will they, won't they, whatever the fuck is going on with Spider-Man and MJ in the comics, and, like, I don't wanna see. I just wanna see sometimes just a drama-free couple just doing their thing. That's just what I wanna see? And just Black Canary deserves some love after, how Mark Guggenheim treated her on on Arrow, and it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't wanna see that. We wanna see greatness from this character, and I feel like just going into more of, like, what kinda eases on, like, the supernatural versus grounded. Like, I feel like like, getting, like, a villain like Count Vertigo would be really fun, like, going into more of like that surreal drug trip sort of feel. I think that could be really awesome. So something like that. I feel like getting a proper Green Arrow. Plus, it's for the most part like safe, like because then you'll maybe get the Arrow crowd, but then you can actually have the character resemble his comic book counterpart. And that could be a little bit riskier where it's like, well, we're not doing, Batman Light like a lot of people know him as, but we're doing this character, but you could get that Smallville crowd in there because he was great on Smallville. So kind of get that in there. I would love to see that. And then the other with Plastic Man, I just think like it's been talked about for years. There was in the 90s, the Wachowskis made a fucking terrible script. I've read that script. It's not good. Like, and then they wanted Keanu Reeves for the role. I'm like, I love Keanu, even prior to him being Neo and he was pretty much only known for Ted. I don't think his style of comedy would work. Um, Get someone like Ben Schwartz, Andy Samberg, Jerry Trainer, like someone who can be goofy as hell. And I feel like if you want to do something like Deadpool esque for DC, obviously don't do Harley Quinn because that's dumb. Do Plastic Man instead, even though Plastic Man definitely doesn't fit into the more R-rated aspect of like Deadpool is. He's more like PG-13 Deadpool, but in the best way possible. And I feel like comedy driven, but not like meta and, just something that's like a ton of fun, like a funny movie and get someone who can be funny and like not making like Joss Whedon quips all the time. I don't get me wrong, I love me some Joss Whedon dialogue, but like just something that's like just kind of a little bit more something more slapstick, just nothing Marvel-esque. We don't need more Marvel-esque stuff where it's like, look at this weird situation type of thing. Just like do its own thing. Like look back on like some of the old slapstick comedies from like maybe the 30s and 40s and like do that. That could be really fun. A
Yeah.
and I feel like it would just both of those characters need some love, and I feel like done right, they can really make those work in terms of movies. Like, I feel like those need some time to shine, and they're not too risky. We're not, going into, like, snow flame territory, but, we got, like, some safe like, I'm just trying to think in terms of, like, James Gunn and Peter Safran, like, they're kinda relatively safe, but at the same time, they do hold, like, a niche audience, mainly with Plastic Man, but it has bbeen talked about for years, so I feel like you're also grabbing onto that, but yeah, those movies, I would absolutely love to see. I don't know about you.
Yeah. I mean, I would look forward to both of those. I mean, I personally have always been a fan of Green Arrow. I think like he was one of the cooler characters to follow in all those Justice League animated shows. And while I think he always for me remained like a mid tier superhero. He still gave you something different from what you got from the Batman, right? Batman has got way more gadgets and all the fancy stuff, and he's almost like Chuck Norris, right? So like there's just a sense of invincibility to the character that you just don't even get um, from most other non-powered characters. But if I were to pick a movie to do, I mean, you could do the TV show with this character or a movie, but I personally would be like, why not just go all out and give him a movie? This is something that DC has already sort of toyed around with the idea of bringing the character to screen in recent years, and I don't know where that effort stands today and who is involved, but I would love to see Static Shock. Like, I wanna see Static Shock in live action. I think that'd be fantastic. Not only, for the sake of, again, we talked about this a couple of days ago where we're talking about like that J.J. Abrams Superman movie, right? And they could go the Val Zod route, they could go the Calvin Ellis route, but they could also just go down the route of his Clark Kent, but he's black. But like here you have a character in Static Shock who is built from the ground up to represent that identity that you don't get to see from a Clark Kent. A very different experience of the world. He lives in Detroit, right? Like, if I remember correctly, was or is it what city is Static Shock from? I forget, like, if it was one of the
I think it
created
was,
cities
like,
or
it was a fictional city. I think it was, like, Dakota or something like that. I would have to look it up,
yeah,
but yeah, I think it was a
but
fictionalized city, but I don't know.
but it was
I
like
haven't watched the Static Shock show. I know
but it
I
was
know
very
Sarah
much like it
yeah,
was like an urban, like,
yeah,
environment. Like,
urban
it
environment,
didn't
yeah.
yeah, it wasn't like he was growing up on a farm, right? Like, it was a very different experience, and I remember watching that show, and it felt so different from, like, a lot of the other DC shows that were on at the time because it felt, like, relatable. It was like DC's, like, I'm not saying it's a good comparison, but, like, the closest thing I can compare it to is, like, watching a Spider-Man animated TV show. Like, the kind of problems that Static was dealing with, in his day-to-day life and how a superhero, like and his friend helping him out and all that stuff. It felt very different than watching a Justice League show where you got, like, these grown-up adults dealing with, like, world-ending problems and, like, they're living in a space station. It's such a different vibe, and I think, like, that would be fantastic to have because it's different from what we got even from Shazam and the DCEU because there you're getting a character that, once he turns into a superhero form is basically invincible and has magic. So, and it's a very different feel than Static Shock, who felt, despite the fact that he had some powers, he felt very vulnerable, kinda like Spider-Man, like Spider-Man can do a lot of superhuman things, but at the same time, he's still just a teenager, so, like, there's a lot of vulnerabilities that go along with that. There's, like, your challenges of how you integrate that into your day-to-day life, and it's very different than Bruce Wayne running a multi-billion dollar conglomerate company while running around at night being a Cape Crusader. So, I would love to see Static Shock. I also you talked about this before we went, live with the show, and I gotta find this picture because I'm like, look at this character, right? Um, Power Girl to me looks amazing. And then I was looking at, like, some of the other artwork, and I'm like, "Wait, that just looks like Supergirl." And then you explained to me it's just Supergirl, but a lot cooler. So, like,
Essentially, yeah.
it's
She's quote unquote Supergirl from Earth 2 back pre-Crisis. There's like a whole mess with her origin, and then Crisis on Infinite Earths happened, and then she became the and then Supergirl died during Crisis, so she became kind of like Supergirl substitute, but she was honestly more like a level-headed, mature, but like kind of more darker and aggressive, cooler version of Supergirl, which Supergirl kind of became again in the new 52. So kind of driving on that, but Paragirl will always remain the better Supergirl, and I would love to see that. But again, with Supergirl warming up tomorrow, they're already doing a Supergirl thing, but I would still love to see Power Girl because Power Girl is just way better in every conceivable way anyway. So I just Power Girl would be awesome. I feel like get
yeah.
Alice Eve. She would be, I think,
Oh,
perfect.
yeah.
Um, so she definitely
I see the
has the
direction you're going in. Yes,
yeah,
definitely.
I think she oh yeah, she would be awesome. So
Mhm.
but yeah, both of those I mean I would love to see Static like, get I know it's like a pretty easy choice, but like Caleb McLaughlin from Stranger Things, he would be a great Static. He might be a little bit too old now, but I think he could probably it could probably work.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, you can
all the
pull it
Stranger
off.
Things casts are like going to be like 30 by the time season 5 starts filming,
Yeah.
and they're going to be playing
Um
teenagers anyway. So it's fine,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
but
well, yeah, yeah, I get it, yeah. I mean, and they will probably do, like, spinoffs. I bet you, like, those actors are not done with that franchise after that
oh
last
yeah.
season anyway, so, it may be, like, more of that Harry Potter situation where they're like, "Alright, let's wait 4 years and age your characters 10 years, and we'll pretend that now you have families." And there you go. It's like
Yeah.
yes, and you live I don't know what town they're gonna be anyway, getting back to the DC stuff, what about like the Metal Men? Like that's something we were talking about it, but as we were
Yeah.
preparing for today's show, and like well, when you initially described it, I'm like, oh, so like DC's version of Iron Man. But then when I looked up these images, and I'm like, it sort of feels like Eternals, but like it's also the image. Some of the crest on their chest looks like Kryptonian, but they're made out of metal. Like, what are
Yeah.
the Metal Men? And like, would you want it to be like a movie, like what they're doing with the Authority? Because the look
I
in
think
some ways is similar to the Authority, but like, or would you want this to be a TV show?
I think it would be like I think a movie would fit them a little bit better. I think TV show might be a little bit much for them. But it's so Will Magnus, the guy on the way to the right, was an inventor and he invented these characters. I believe it's gold, tin, lead, mercury, and platinum. And then one
Mm,
more that I am forgetting, unfortunately. But yeah, it so these characters are essentially like they're robots that can pretty much or androids that can pretty much do anything. They can shapeshift. They can like turn their body. That they almost look like liquid metal, kind of like the T-1000, and they
I
can
was gonna say,
shapeshift.
yeah.
They can, they have like a whole power set, and I feel like with these characters, I think would be really awesome. Would be like sort of like have like a retro futuristic vibe, like sort of just like yeah, like sort of like a 1950s feel, but in like the modern day. Like I feel like that's kind of what they're planning with the Fantastic Four movie, and
Yeah.
that's what I feel like can be done here.
You know what'd be
Um,
cool? Like, if they did this, but, like, they set these characters on, like, another planet that was Earth-like and maybe had humanoids there, and so they maybe just change up the race a little bit of the inventor character so he's not quite human, but, um it's sort of Earth parallel. Like it's kind of like that planet that they showed in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, where it's basically modeled after Earth, except the alien races there all look completely different, but like the houses, the cars, and all that. I'm not
yeah,
saying do that. I'm just saying, but like, what about you? Because like I kind of harken back to like I'm a big fan of Stargate and even like Star Trek. They do this all the time, where they're like, your team is gonna go visit a planet. Most of the time, you're going to visit like these locations where they're either way behind in terms of their technology of our main characters, or they're way ahead. But every once in a while, the writers decide to like challenge themselves and go to like a world or a planet where that it seems very similar to the one they're coming from, like the world that we live in on Earth. Like,
Mm,
and so it's like you all of a sudden just start to see like maybe how it on the surface looks the same, but there's subtle differences in how things are developed, and maybe things are a little bit different. It's almost like, it's kind of like stepping out of the real world into the world of a movie like the Terminator Judgment Day, which is meant to kind of almost be like, oh, it's the world we live in, except there's somebody coming into the past from the future trying to destroy this other this kid, while another this other like Terminator is trying to stop him. And this, by the way, there's a new T1000 can shapeshift and just completely um, destroy any kind of like resistance that any
yeah.
current technology can put against him. It's it would be that kind of an experience. There's a little bit of an out of body meta experience that I think would work really well in that situation, rather than having it be on Earth, because we have seen examples of that. Like, like for example, we got Wakanda in Marvel. You've got like Atlantis and DC, where you've got these societies that like are. It feels like they're on Earth, but at the same time, their technology is way different and in some ways more
Mm,
advanced. And whereas this would kind of like it's not on Earth, but it feels like it's another Earth. And you've got these
yeah.
maybe this guy looks the same, dresses the same as we've seen this, and it will create this unique dynamic, because I haven't really seen that in the superhero genre all that much outside of Guardians of the Galaxy, and I thought it creates a lot
Yeah.
of opportunities for good storytelling, especially if they were to decide to do this as a TV show. I think then you can really kind of play out the many storylines, especially like socioeconomic issues and stuff. It's like great sci-fi is full of stuff where
Oh, yeah, of
we
course.
use like metaphors to explore complex topics that are otherwise harder to tackle. And I think this would be they could make for a great storytelling in that sci-fi genre. Like it's because otherwise you run the risk of, like you said, drawing comparisons to the T1000 or the Sentinels, or even like the Iron Man suits and stuff. Like everybody's got an Iron Man suit in Marvel now, but like everybody on this team is basically made out of metal. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they
Um,
would want to make it somewhat different and stand out a little bit.
yeah, I just think that it would be a good, like, kind of like not a wholesome show, but like just like I feel like they could do a lot of different stuff. And Iron was the guy that I was so it was gold, iron, tin, lead, mercury, and platinum. And I think copper was introduced in like the 2000s or something like that. But this is like the main team. There was recently a comic book miniseries with him that I heard was pretty good. And yeah, I just feel like this is like could be like a good like have like something like a retro futuristic vibe. But I think personally, I think two TV shows that could definitely work as TV shows would definitely be The Question and Legion of Superheroes. Again, two very different ones. The Question, I feel like you could even I think a miniseries could also work for that. Just like sort of that like super dark, like
I would love
grounded
to see something
film
like that.
noir.
Yeah.
And that was I believe that was a show or a movie in development hell for like years. And then I think James Gunn announced like, oh yeah, we're gonna have this as part of, the DCU. Who knows? But like this is another fan, like kind of like Booster Gold. It's like this is like a fan favorite that people have loved and people have wanted to see an adaptation for years, but we haven't gotten that. And I mean the Justice League Unlimited version, voiced by Jeffrey Combs, legend. So, you have that. And I feel like getting someone like that. I mean, I would love for Jeffrey Combs to play him, but the man's in his like 60s at this point. So I don't know if he can make that work. But I feel like Damian Lewis could definitely be cool, like sort of have that like hard edged feel to him. And like because this is I mean Rorschach the Question was the inspiration for Rorschach. So I feel like kind of having like that darker edge for that character, like have like a proper film noir TV show, like just having like him be like a PI, but like having like a rougher edge. That would just be really cool. Like, that could be really working. Then like the total opposite with Legion of Superheroes, you have these characters that are in the far off future and are essentially, this whole grab bag of like weird heroes. Like, sure, you have the OG3, Saturn Girl, Lightning Lad, and unfortunately, the main guy I am not recollecting. I will get it in a sec, but I feel like Legion of Superheroes is just ripe for TV show potential. Yes, would the budget be kind of high, but I think they could, make that work. I mean, we've gotten them in animation. Oh, by the way, I wanted to quickly mention we almost did get a Metal Men movie directed by Barry Sonnenfeld, but that never came to be. Now they're sent. Now I
Barry Sonnenfeld is known for Men in Black, right? If I'm right.
Yeah, so
Yes,
which
it
was
would be
also a
right up
comic
his
book
alley, right?
adaptation.
Yeah.
So he almost did that, and then I think, and then it also was released that oh, we're getting an animated Metal Man movie. Who knows if that's still happening because it's been 3 years since that was announced.
Yeah.
So, going back to Legion of Superheroes, you had it was just like just like this, like again, kind of going into that retro futuristic feel. As Cosmic Boy was the one I was missing. That was the founding members: Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, and Lightning Lad. And then you opened it up to like all these characters. Like Brainiac 5 has been, in a lot of it was in
Well,
Supergirl. Then
yeah,
you
I was gonna
have
mention, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Phantom Girl, who was a Terrifics member because they tried to do their own like Fantastic Four, and the Terrifics was like kind of their modern, thing. And then you had the stuff with Superboy, but that's gotten retconned, and now Monel is that character. You have like Triplicate Girl, Invisible Kid, Karate Kid, Chameleon Boy, Matter Eater Lad. Like you have like this whole
It
graphic of like just going full on silly,
it's
just like really
yeah,
have like something. You can even make it like more of like a kids movie because I mean, again, we have the animated series which was like aimed for children, but like you can
right.
also do like obviously make it for kids, but like kind of stretch it a little bit because I've been a guy who's been, I mean, most people are upset with what the MPA has been with ratings, how like essentially PG is like just like, oh, that's the kiddie thing where it's like, no, PG had balls at one its point. Remember, Jaws was a PG movie. I want to see more stuff like that.
Yeah,
So I
that
feel,
I don't think it feels like a PG movie today. Most people would probably say PG-13 if you were to ask them off the top of their head.
but I feel like we need to kind of stretch like the PG rating a little bit more. And I feel like having like this kind of like fun, like kids feel, but then like kind of dealing with that darker subject matter that can bring about like the whole the famous the very famous story with I think it was Iron Lad, I believe that's who it was, who famously, or Pharaoh Lad, that's what it was, died destroying the Sun Eater, and then that led to the Fatal Five and all that. So you have that whole thing, and I feel like you could, and with a TV show, there's just you can introduce so many characters because, like, if you look up like the list of Legion members, it's almost endless. Like with how many, like, okay, that's a superpower we can use, and like they bring like so many like weird, like there's a guy who uses an android suit. Yeah, let's have him in here. Or you have a guy, who astral projection. Yeah, sure. Like, let's include that character. Or you get someone who, shoots fire from their hands. Just like kind of like just like the encapsulation of what the Silver Age was. Like really get
Yeah.
that on TV, like with the Legion of Superheroes. That would just be so fun.
I
And I
mean, they
feel
also,
like,
like it's ripe like, you look at this picture here just for a second, right? I can see that they've got a Captain America ripoff and a Hulk ripoff in this picture. Like, it's
yeah, of
also,
course.
like, it's crazy. And, like, that's what the back then the comic books were known for. They would just rip off characters from each other. You're like there's a version of Superman running around in Marvel, and then there's other rip-offs running around in DC. They've even got a Shazam. Is that the Lightning Boy, or is that no? Or is that somebody different? Because they have like a Shazam-esque looking character in this image
I
too.
believe that's
It's
a descendant because I mean, you could see the girl all the way to the right who's using super speed. That's the great granddaughter of Barry Allen, I believe.
ah
XS. Um, I think Jenny Ognatz is her name, but yeah, she was a member of the Legion of Superheroes. Um, but yeah, like but like something like that, like, and you could, yeah, and then like with it taking place in the future, you're not gonna have to totally worry about like continuity.
Yeah.
You can like and then introduce like, oh yeah, we have this character who's a reference to, Barry Allen. You have a reference to this character who's a reference to Superman. You have like, and just like, as well as showing like, as you said, like being a big Star Trek fan, like showing a positive view of the future because as I mean, whatever your thoughts are on modern Star Trek, it's like, oh, let's make, modern Star Trek all dingy and depressing. It's like, well, I don't want to see that. Let's have a positive view of the future. Like, hey, what we can be, like, sort of being like what, like with the living embodiment of what, Superman stands for. Like, people have complained like, "Oh, the American way." It's like, no, the American way isn't like pro America. It's like what we
Right.
could be, like the old fashioned like values, but in a modern context, like being the best person you can be, being compassionate to your neighbors, and like building that better future. And I feel like Legion of Cerberus could be a really awesome thing of that. So, like, have it be like sort of like getting like children crowd, teenage crowd, the preteen crowd, like kind of get like every like childhood facet under there. And I just think that would be awesome. Legion of Superheroes would definitely be one of the best in terms of live action because I feel like you could do so much with that. And there's just so many characters that you can like pick and choose in terms of who to focus on because there's so many. And I feel like, as we said before, give us a little bit more Silver Age. We deserve the campiness now. I feel like, let's really jump on that. I think that would be
Yeah.
really fun.
No, no, I agree. I think it's something that would be very different than anything else they've got going on. Despite the fact that yes, we have James Gunn running the show and uh, funky, campy is the name of the game, and a lot of stuff he does. Despite the fact that he's also got the ability to take something funny and then all of a sudden then the next moment it's so poignant and you might be crying because some character is going through something that it's just makes you sad, and he's got that range as a storyteller, and I think
Hmm.
with the Legion of Superheroes you can do exactly that, like you said. um it will have far fewer creative boundaries than something like a Teen Titans show, because it
Yeah.
has to coexist alongside all those other characters that exist in the current continuity. You can just sort of leave it and be its own thing. That's why Logan became such a big hit, because James Mangold was given the creative freedom. Like, you don't have to worry about how this fits into any other X-Men movie. We're not gonna try to dictate to you how to write and shoot and film, and how to play out the third act of this film, because it has to lead somewhere after this. You just do your thing, and do whatever you want to do, and the direction you want to take that story. And it's always fun to see what creators can do. Sometimes that freedom leads to terrible results. Sometimes that freedom leads to brilliant results. We have seen the dark side of that with some CW shows that sort of they were on a good track and then they just completely went off the rails. Like, I think Supergirl started out with like aliens existing in that their version of of Earth as like a good concept that they used well, but then over time it just became something that became a crutch, and then eventually it just became like, all right, well, at this point like everything goes. It doesn't really matter. Like, you kind of lose the
Yeah.
stakes, and I think that's the one thing that a show like Legion of Superheroes would have to avoid, is getting into a situation where you create a world where there are no stakes, because there's like a superhero to deal with every problem and every power set, simply because you're
Oh yeah, of
connected
course.
to all of those heroes. And that's something like I think Justice League Unlimited, even more so than Justice League, and the animated series, because of course there's more characters. It did a pretty good job of, like, they only brought out the characters into each episode that were like necessary for that story.
Yeah.
Seemingly, like, all the other characters were either unavailable, off doing some other adventures, or whatever the case
Hmm.
might be, or living their day-to-day lives. So, and then every once in a while they would be like, all right, well, somebody else does come in and help, like, expedite a problem potentially, but it gives you the ability to play around with different combinations of heroes that I think, like, we would never otherwise see together. So I think that could be a great way to go about this. They can also do this as an animated show, because they don't have to make this live action. Of course, the DCU we know is going to involve animation as much as it's going to involve live action.
Yeah.
So far, we've
Even
only
though it's
got
hard to do that,
one.
but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and then when you look at the slate so far, we've only really got one animated anything on the docket that's Future Commandos. I bet you they're probably thinking about, if not developing a few other animated projects. And I think Legion of Superheroes could be ripe for being one of those animated projects, especially if they go with like the art style that those early 2000s DC shows were known for, rather than I think what they've been using in recent years. I'm not a fan of some of the art and design of the characters and how the animation is done in recent years of DC movies, at the animated movies, I should say. I preferred like that early 2000s style a little bit more, but I get it. Like some of that was like low budget, like a consequence of budgeting more so than creative choices. But anyway,
Mhm.
I digress. I think, look, ultimately, we're all looking forward to not season, but like chapter one of the DCU Gods and Monsters. We've only got part one so far that's been confirmed. That's 10 projects. There's all kinds of options you can get into. We didn't even talk about some of the characters that, there's even more things you can get into, more
Oh, yeah.
wacky, crazy, out there
We could
characters.
talk about this for 5 hours and still
Yeah.
just barely make a dent. Like, there
And
were some
and
others, like yeah, just, like, so many characters we'd love to see, like, this ones that haven't gotten enough love that need some love. Like, I mentioned, like, before we started, like, I, Vampire and the Creeper, where, for I, Vampire, I'm the horror guy, so I love, horror, and I feel like that could be done really well because God knows Morbius couldn't do anything, so let's see DC's crack at it. And the
yeah.
Creeper is like just this weird zany character from Steve Ditko that's just like, all right, yeah, hell, include him. Get Will Arnett to play him. Sure, why not? Just I think you can make that work. It's just like there's just so many. I just wish I could talk about this endlessly because I
Yeah.
love like just I want to again. I think a Lobo movie you mentioned it the other day. Like I'd love to see that. Like give us Lobo, give us. I want to see the ZD list characters that normally wouldn't get love, but I feel like James Gunn would, give us that love if, if we're good to him and we're patient. So,
Yeah, yeah, and I think like ultimately James Gunn has so far towed the line well between balancing those more well-known characters with the lesser known properties,
oh
because
yeah.
you look at those 10 projects they announced: Superman, Batman, right? Like those, and Lanterns even, and nowadays Supergirl, because of that TV show that ran for such a long time. You've got like 4 projects right there that are very well known. Waller, you already connecting that to the Suicide Squad movies because it's the same actress, even though it's a new universe. We know there's a Peacemaker show coming, which has already had a season. So you've already got like half of these projects that people are familiar with the characters, and there's a general awareness in the mainstream. Swamp Thing, a lot of people, even if they're not really sure who the character is, they probably know, "Oh, wasn't there like a Swamp Thing TV show or movie?" And there's like probably 2 examples from both
Yeah.
instances that can look back on. Paradise Lost, like you mentioned, is connected to Wonder Woman, so like you're kinda, "Okay, so it's the Amazons. Okay, I got it." Like, and the way they pitched it as the Game of Thrones of DC, that immediately puts like a vision in your mind that may not be exactly what they're going for, but you can kinda get a gist of it.
Oh
The
yeah.
Authority, like I said,
Exactly.
is really out there. Future Commanders is really out there. Booster Gold is something that, if you are a comic book fan, you have been clamoring for a long time. Otherwise, like you may be like, who is Booster Gold? And like you can pitch him in one sentence. He's basically just a normal dude from the future who comes back into the present and uses futuristic technology to be a superhero. And so he's a bit of a douche, and that's kind of his thing.
Yeah. And
And
to make
that's
money.
something people, and to make money, exactly. Which are all things that people can immediately buy. Like, okay, I get it exactly what you're gonna be doing with this. It could be, you can have a lot of fun with this if you wanted to. And the fact that they're gonna make it a live action TV series rather than a movie, or something animated, I think that's probably the least likely choice I would have picked, like intuitively, because
Yeah.
now all of a sudden, like you're opening up new avenues. I mean, to me, that feels like it's like White Collar that used to be on USA Network mixed with like a superhero genre. That's maybe what we're going for here, like a con man who's out there to make money, and he just has technology from the future to help him out. Like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like variety, and I think what this tells us, if anything, about the future of the DCU is that you're always going to get a nice balance. And that you're gonna get your favorites, you're gonna get your Justice League characters, you're gonna get your usual suspects like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, in the future, hopefully the Flash, Aquaman, those characters that some of those characters they're veering away from for the time being, but I'm sure they're going to integrate down the road. Wonder Woman as well, but they're also going to go in these other directions, and like that there's lesser known characters involved, and that like we said yesterday, is gonna lead to us hopefully having a much more lived in feeling world, a
Yep,
world of the
exactly.
DCU that feels alive, that feels real, that feels like you can be walking
Really
around on
real.
those streets and you can understand it from the top all the way down to the, the street level parts of that world. And while the MCU, I think, really has taken a good almost 2 decades to round itself out in that way, I think James Gunn's plans can help them get there, like, within the first 5 years, which is
Oh, yeah.
fantastic, because then you could just build from there, and kinda, like, chart a new path forward that even the MCU so far has not really done. So guys, let us know in the comments what you think about all of these ideas. Of course, we pitched a lot of different TV shows and movies. Maybe James Gunn comes across this one time and he's like, "You know what? We weren't gonna do a Plastic Man, but we should do it now because you have convinced me to
Just
do a
because
Plastic
John said so. I
just
think
because
just
John
because of
said
this
so."
one guy,
Yes.
let's finally do it.
Yeah, we should probably put your, like, Thread account, tag up there on screen so that way James Gunn can find you one day and be like, "Hey,
Be like,
John,
"Hey,
because
yo,
you mentioned it that other day, I thought it was a great idea
I can
with
write the
doing
script,
Plastic Man." Yeah.
I got you. I got you. I can do that."
Yeah, I bet you, like, he would probably take a pitch, maybe just, let's see what you got. Let's see what you got. I think James Gunn is open to ideas, and, he's said as much that there's a lot of unplanned, unannounced projects that are in the works, things that maybe even he didn't foresee a year ago that are now, perhaps coming down the
Constant
pike.
the
So
industry is constantly changing. It's constantly,
exactly.
reinventing itself and, we're constant well, this character, they're not a lot of okay, sure, why not?
Yeah, every day is a new adventure, and that's I think the motto over at DC, which it gives you that sense of this fresh feeling that the future is bright and the possibilities are endless. So that's about as good a spot as you can put a brand in, especially a brand like DC that has really struggled for positivity in recent years for many different reasons. So I'm really glad that we're in this spot, and we'll continue to talk about these news topics as new updates come out, whether it's Superman Legacy, Creature Commandos, anything new that they announced regarding Peacemaker season 2, or projects that we haven't heard of, like we were talking about today. So to talk about all of that so much more, and to listen into the conversations and play your part by adding your comments, whether it's in the live chat or drop your comments in down below on YouTube. If you're watching this on Facebook, drop your comments down below. Hit the like button. If you're on YouTube, subscribe. That helps us, out with the algorithm. Of course, it helps you catch up with us each time we go live with the DCU Daily Show, which we do 5 days a week. And then, of course, we have occasional specials. We've got a bunch of those currently in the pipeline that we would love to share with you soon. And of course, we have also Curious the Show, Movie of the Week, and other programming on this net channel on YouTube. So keep coming back here. And until the next episode of Also Curious, as well as the next episode of DCU Daily, which we will see probably next week. It's been great talking to you. Go out there, have a great weekend. Go watch something DC related, and keep coming back here and talk to us all about that. We'd love to have that conversation. Until then, guys, have a great week ahead. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time.